Thank you, Mr. Maasowi, for your time.
My pleasure.
Mr. Maasowi, it's 28.7 million from the accounts of the Pakistan High Commission is now with you. Is that right, sir?
It's not with me. It's with a court in the Isle of Man. It's in the escrow accounts of the court in the Isle of Man, because Broadsheet was put into liquidation thanks to Pakistan not honouring its agreement and not paying our bills as we were working to investigate the crooks. And so...
Okay. Before we start, let's begin like one by one. So how this whole journey started? You have been approached by President Pervez Musharraf time. Is that right, sir? In which year?
My group were approached in 2000 to come to Pakistan with a view to going after stolen assets. And we agreed, and we agreed, and one of my associates flew out to Pakistan and negotiated with the government of Pakistan, sent me a draft contract at the time, and I said, we've got to have two things in this contract. One is, with respect to the targets that have been identified, the individuals and the alter egos of those individuals around Mr. Asif Zardari, the late Benazir Bhutto, and then Mr. Nawaz Sharif. These contracts must not be revocable. And the reason for that was simple, because I knew that as soon as these targets, who were powerful men, almost always invariably men, had stolen a lot of money, they were able to bribe officials in order to get themselves removed from the list of targets. So that was a bit of a sticking point, and we were adamant that we would not enter into a contract unless that clause was there. The irrevocability of the contract with respect to the targets, and events proved us to be correct in having insisted on that. I knew how Pakistan worked. I'd been teaching.
Before you comment about what the Pakistan role was, let's begin with that. Who approached you from the Pakistani company? Have you ever met with Musharraf, President Musharraf at that time?
Not at that time, but I met him later, yes.
You met him later?
Yes.
Okay. So what was the target? To find the people who have stolen the money, the corrupt elements who are actually taking the money from Pakistan and brought it in England, right?
Initially, the focus of President Musharraf, General Musharraf, as he then was, he became president 2 years later, you recall, after the elections. As he then was, the insistence was to go after Nawaz Sharif and his government, but we insisted that we would not be a tool of political witch hunts. We insisted that the previous government should be looked at too, and General Musharraf, to his lasting credit, agreed. And he said, yes, the others, namely the Bhutto government, should be looked at too.
So how many people were in the list of your radar? That was Sharif family, Benazir family, and any other politicians or any business people or ordinary people?
Approximately 200 people and alter egos.
200 people?
200 people and companies and their companies, yes. About 200 people and their companies, yes.
Do you have that letter, which obviously you're going to share with us, that the list of the people who are on the radar of your company to find out that what exactly they're doing and how they have actually got the money and they brought it in England?
Yeah, of course I do. They gave us a list and we said this is incomplete. We think from our preliminary investigation, these other people should be in that list. And those negotiations at the time showed us that this was possibly politically inspired, and we said we're not going to engage in political witch hunts. We're not prepared to do that. If you want an anti-corruption effort, it must be across the board, and it must be clear that we are not going to go after the adversaries of General Musharraf. We're going to go after the enemies of the people of Pakistan, those who have stolen assets from Pakistan. And our preliminary investigation showed that the list should be longer. It made our job much more difficult, of course, because it's much easier to investigate 2 or 3 people than 200 people. But you know, we were adamant we're going to do this straight, and they agreed that we should.
Any other name, Mr. Maasowi, you can recall from that time apart from these 2 families?
I will give you the full list in due course. Yeah, I mean, one of them became a Minister of Interior in the Sharif government. He was on the list of targets, and they NAB asked us to remove his name, and we refused. And why? And very shortly after that, he was made a minister. I mean, that's the sham, that's the fraud, that's the hypocrisy which was the government of Pakistan at the time.
They were doing that. Okay. So who was in contact you from the NAB side? Who influences, who sent you messages at that time that this is what we want and you have to deliver it like that? Any names in particular you can give us?
Well, after are you asking about when we came to sign the contract, or after where we were investigating these?
When you were contracting and the people were after the signing the contract.
We had lawyers in Pakistan who were working with us, and they were liaising with NAB, and we also had individual officers of the company on the ground in NAB who actually had offices in NAB buildings. In the NAB building, we had an office in the NAB building at the time, and they were cooperating with us initially. But very, very shortly, when General Amjad was there, it was going swimmingly. When Amjad was there, it was going very clean, and the investigation was genuine. But I wasn't surprised that Amjad was removed very quickly. And Amjad was removed because he was determined that he was going to clean out Pakistan. He was very naive. I thought it was very naive to think that. And then a whole bunch of other people came in, and we will see what the judgment of the court was about their performance later. So we were prepared to give credit and believe that General Musharraf, by appointing General Amjad to the headship of NAB, he was serious about going through this thing. But that didn't last very long. He was removed.
So Mr. Amjad was actually the point of contact with you most of the time. And what happened after that, Mr. Mousavi? Was any name you can recall from the NAB corridors in particular who was the regular the point of contact?
There were a number of people. One of them is died. Ghazanfar was there, and he's dead. Then General Maqbool came. Well, his evidence the court didn't find credible. General Hafiz came, which his evidence the court did not find credible, because they lied to the court. I mean, straight. And so we could see this was going downhill all the way. When Amjad was removed, NAB went downhill. NAB became something the contrary to what it was intended initially. Had I suspected that this is going to happen that quickly, we would have never agreed to go along. You see, there were two companies. There's Broadsheet and there was International Asset Recovery. The International Asset Recovery was going after the assets of the Zardari Bhutto family, and Broadsheet was going after Nawaz Sharif et al. And it became very quickly apparent that this whole thing has become a sham. And
so you're saying is that NAB never cooperated with you. That's the reason you're saying it's a sham, because when you were going, they were cooperating with you. That is the question. What they were cooperating with you? They
were cooperating while Amjad was there. After that, they stopped cooperating.
And what is your what makes you suspicious it's sham? Because these are the people, they have made a deal with those all. Obviously, you were after the people like Benazir and all other people, the Sharif family. So these are actually the targets, and because Musharraf had a deal with them. So do you think is any other that was the main reason that made you suspicious?
Well, you know, I'm glad you asked this question, because in 2007, General Musharraf came to the Oxford Union and he talked about what he'd done. And I got up and asked, it's on the film. I asked him, I said, General, you invited us to Pakistan and you set up NAB. And he said, yes. And he went, struck in the air, he said, I told him to go and nab him. He went just like that. And I said, yes, General, what happened? He said, you know, Mr. Mousavi, what happened was the Supreme Court ordered us to hold elections, and we did, and all the crooks were re-elected. And they came back to power, and they gutted NAB. And that was evidence, and we exhibited that in front of the judge. We said, this is the president of Pakistan admitting that once they held elections, all the crooks were re-elected and they gutted NAB. And of course, the first thing is they got rid of General Amjad. And yes, while Amjad was there, they were genuinely cooperating with us. So to his lasting credit, while the military were unencumbered by the politics of elections in Pakistan, at least while Amjad and early on while Musharraf was there. I mean, it's odd for me as a human rights lawyer to say this, but I have to respect the truth of history. The documents speak for themselves. They were cooperating, and we asked for information, they would send it. But then as soon as Amjad went, the cooperation ceased. They would ask us formally to remove crooks from the list of targets. And of course, we resisted.
Right. So it was more like a hand-picked list, turned into a hand-picked list later. Having said that, you entered into the contract with the government of Pakistan in 2000, right?
That's right.
And they ended in 2003. That in those 3 years, you have a list of 200 people. And what progress your company has made in those 3 years? Have you able to give information about the funds in UK?
Well, who extradited Admiral Huck? We did. We found his assets in the United States. We cooperated with the FBI. We alerted the FBI. We arrested him. We extradited him. And, you know, he had stolen, well, you know how much he'd stolen. And what do? They cut a deal with him. And they let him go. So NAB's statement this morning is a straightforward lie. I'm addressing the camera and telling the Pakistani people, NAB is lying to you when they said broadsheet did not recover. Just ask. And the judge asked the evidence, asked for the evidence. He said, who extradited the admiral from the United States? We found millions of dollars.
How much money you recovered? Like how much money you think that they have from Mr. Admiral, the guy who in America?
We identified hundreds of millions of dollars. NAB sabotaged our efforts at every point. There was an account which we froze in Jersey, okay? And we wrote to NAB and said, please write a letter to the Attorney General of Jersey and instruct them to release the money, not to broadsheet, but to Pakistan. You know what they did? First, they removed the gentleman from the list of targets. Second, they released his account. Third, they appointed him as the Home Minister of Pakistan. Do I need to say any more to you about that? The lie that NAB is saying to the people of Pakistan this morning is contrary to what the judge found in London. Sir Anthony Evans found that broadsheet performed. It performed effectively, and possibly it was removed because it was too effective. It was getting too close to the loot, stolen loot of men, and overwhelmingly men, who were the targets. That's why NAB was it. I'm not surprised that they should come and hide behind the veneer of credible posture, suggesting, oh, that was a different NAB, it was a different leadership. This leadership has nothing to do with it. The reality is exactly the same creature because they're lying in exactly the same way. Just the record shows that a broadsheet found, restituted, repatriated funds, found Admiral and extradited them. Broadsheet found hundreds of millions of dollars. NAB sabotaged broadsheet's efforts, and so the judge found. The judge says in his judgment that the government of Pakistan engaged in a conspiracy to defraud broadsheet. It engaged in a conspiracy to disrupt the operations of broadsheet. It engaged in a conspiracy to prevent broadsheet from carrying out its duties. So I'm not surprised that such an institution as NAB should today come and say that broadsheet recovered nothing. It's a straightforward lie.
Mr. Mousavi, tell me that how much money you believe that you have given the information to the Musharraf government and the NAB in Pakistan, that this much money of Sharif family, we believe that is available or in the form of assets is in UK?
Well, not just UK, globally. Not just globally.
No, that was not in UK, that was globally. So have you given any information to the NAB or the government of Pakistan at that point?
Of course we did. We identified possible hundreds of millions, up to $1 billion, I would say even more, that we were kind of pretty certain we were that, I don't mean just the Sharif family, but we had a list of about 200 people.
Just in particular with Sharif family, there were billions, you were saying, around the world?
Should we say they had plenty of explanation to do about the source of their funds?
So they have plenty of explanations that it is due from their part, that they have to explain where they got all this money from.
Look at the lies that Nawaz Sharif came out with 2 days ago on television. He said the broadsheet decision by the court exonerates them. Really? It exonerates the Sharif family? It doesn't do anything of the sort. It doesn't do anything of the sort. I mean, they just used first-rate spin to suggest that broadsheet has exonerated Sharif. I say quite clearly, broadsheet did exactly the opposite. The reason why they got rid of us, I suspect, was because the Sharifs were behind all that, but others were. We saw a number of individuals who they asked and we refused to remove as our targets. I can't give an exact figure, but we certainly had suspicions of hundreds of millions of dollars of money that had been stolen, that was illicit, that was unaccountable, unexplained wealth.
So you were saying is that there was a deal between the Musharraf and the Sharif family. That is the reason that you were not given enough access of the information by NAB and the people who were there, and that's why you were facing difficulties getting the information. So that actually led to the termination of your contract in 2003, because they were in power. They were like, there was a deal made with the Sharif family that exactly became the reason of everything.
I repeat what I said. I can only rely on what the President of Pakistan said in the Oxford Union. I asked him that straight to his face, standing about 10 feet away from him. I said, President Musharraf, you appointed a number of human rights lawyers as investigators to come and assist NAB. What happened? And he said, we were ordered to hold elections and all the crooks came to power. And they came back and they got it now. His words. It's on the record. Call the Oxford Union and ask for the tape. It's there in black and white. You don't need to ask me. It came from the horse's mouth.
You know this Avonfield apartments in London?
Yes,
they were brought in 90s. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So do you believe that this is the same money used, where there's a lot of questions and about the money, where they got this money from? So do you believe that the same money used, or do you have only suspicions about that?
Well, what did the court find? The Accountability Court in Pakistan found that it was stolen money. Who am I to second guess the court? It was on the back of that we went to freeze them, and we did. And then what happened was they put up the money, they paid us, so we didn't pursue the matter. It's a complete lie to say the broadsheet court action exonerates the Sharif family because of the events surrounding Avonfield apartments. It is totally untrue. The reason why broadsheet did not pursue the Avonfield apartments was because we found other money in Pakistan's accounts, and by court order we froze it, and then they were able to we were able to have it turned over. That's the reason. The reason why the action against Avonfield was dropped had nothing to do with whether those were bona fide purchases by the Sharif family. It is my submission, and if it ever came to another action, if the government of Pakistan decided one day they're going to be clean, and my alma mater, University of Oxford, is also the alma mater of Prime Minister Imran Khan. Should he come decide that he wants us to continue this investigation, of course we'll go after Avonfield, because there's enough evidence to suggest that. Let's put it this way: the reason why we dropped the investigation of Avonfield was because we'd been able to collect what was owed to us under judgment. It cannot be in any shape or form used by the Sharif family as an indication of their exoneration, because broadsheet dropped the action.
Have you ever approached Sharif family, you or your lawyers, to their lawyers for any sort of a help?
They approached us. We didn't approach them.
And what did they say about that?
They offered money for us to go away.
And when that happened, Mr. Maasowi?
Initially, in the first time, it was 2012, when we had somebody who turned up with a photograph of himself with Nawaz Sharif and told us he was a nephew of Sharif, and that they would like to negotiate. And we just laughed and we said, we take our chances in the courts. We don't negotiate with crooks.
Right.